Anyway, just know that that's why we're here. And sometimes you can't be here in person. Remember, even if you're not actively using the Distance Reiki Share, you can still connect in with this energy of the circle, of the community, and receive that love and support and healing, empowerment at any time. So let's say you're just thinking about the community, or you're thinking about the Distance Share and the energy that we empower by being here together like this with these intentions for one another and for all of us, that, that intention of wellness in every area in our life. And sometimes those areas are your spiritual health, your physical health, personal well-being. Sometimes it's your work life, your relationships, finances, all of those different areas in life. And sometimes you're in the challenge of those things, or in any of those areas, or multiple areas. And sometimes you're in the empowerment of them. So Reiki is, also for those empowered times when you're just full on thriving and going for it, and things are working, and, your ideas are there and things are manifesting, that Reiki continues to empower that and strengthen those abilities as well. So remembering that typically in a Reiki session, or even how we think in structuring our invocations in these groups, structuring the group itself, is that typically two things are happening with Reiki. One is the things that you need to let go of are releasing, and the things you're ready to bring in are coming in and revealing. And Reiki energy does both of those things kind of automatically. One of the things, because, spiritual practices and healing modalities are typically doing those same two things, the thing you're always thinking about is, what energy are you working with to accomplish the letting go and the bringing in? And then what techniques are you using that connect you to the energy, to receive the energy, deliver the energy? And so that's true both with the letting go part and also the bringing in part. And so that is always happening, and we are always conscious of facilitating that in this group, and we are working with Reiki energy. So the way the Reiki energy works is, as you let go of the things you're releasing, those things that you release are healed. They're carried into the consciousness of Reiki, the spiritual aspect, however it all works. And, I have my own ideas. You may have your own ideas about what that looks like or how that works. But if you think about the energy of Reiki, operates on the authority of love, the power of compassion, and it heals and it empowers. It reveals who you truly are, your authentic self, your true self, your inner truth. So we're always working with that in these Distance Reiki shares. That's always the intention of the energy, and working with Reiki energy. And even though we know there are so many people in here with all kinds of great skills in other modalities, while we're here, we're working with the Reiki energy, because that's the name of it. That's the commonality of everybody joining. So that brings us to the term today of scope of practice also, and what that means. So we're going to talk about that today too. So anyway, back to the energy itself, just know, sorry, my voice is going, just know that you can always tap into the energy of this circle and this community. And even if it's not live or one-on-one, or you're not actively listening on YouTube or the podcast channel, energetically, we are setting an intention that this energy is here for our community and anyone else, of course, that, wants to tap into it. So for each of you that are here right now, and those of you that are listening later, just know that, even if we're not specifically talking about your situation right now, we are talking about your situation too. So we come in as a group to do this work together for wellness, and wellness for ourselves and the earth. And all right. And then for those of you that are new here, just to let you know what the format is, it can change a little bit, but typically we do some type of an invocation. And the invocation or Reiki journey is always built with those things in mind. So there's going to be a part of letting go, and then the part of bringing in who you really are, revealing your authentic self in the invocations, activating the Reiki energy. And then also we try to talk about a relevant subject. And so every month we'll kind of do a general overall, hey, this month we're going to be talking about these things. And so this month we've been talking about spiritual lingo, that, you hear this stuff and it's like, what are you talking about? I don't know what that means. And so we've been talking about that. Last week we did imbuing your sacred items, and then the how to. And so sometimes it changes because different things show up to talk about. And then we go into breakout rooms to share Reiki with each other in smaller groups. So like 3 to 4 people per room. And one thing to know about this is you are always welcome to show up late and leave early. So we try to make this like as kind of like there's really not a commitment other than to yourself. And of course, we all love our community coming together. So, but as far as, whether you have to get here late or you have to leave early or you can't come at all, that's why we also post it on YouTube and on our podcast channels, so that you can tap in later if you want to, and you can also tap in energetically. So that's the format. We usually end right at about 11 o'clock and Pacific time. And so I think what we were going to do, I want to mention one more thing, is our Q&A podcast is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So the Q&A podcast is we meet on Zoom like this, but it's more of a podcast. It's a couple of hours long where we get into conversation about Reiki. You guys can ask your questions, make your comments, join in. You can also observe and not join in verbally or even be on camera. You can keep your camera off if you're shy about that. But anyway, that's our podcast Q&A, and that's, again, another community event that we do every month. So you do need to be on our email list to receive that link. If you are already on our email list, you don't need to sign up again, just one time. And also, if you wake up tomorrow and think, I didn't get the email, you can pop us an email at Colleen@ReikiLifestyle.com, and we'll send you the link first thing in the morning. All right. Anything else, Robyn? And then I'm going to let you get started because I can feel I'm still talking.
Actually, that's okay. You should probably just go into the scope of practice because you're kind of rolling into it. I just wanted to mention that we also have classes in August. So we have Human Reiki 1 and 2, and Animal Reiki 1 and 2, and Master, all in August. They are online. Colleen is teaching the Human Reiki 1 and 2. And then Colleen, Sue, and myself, who are 3 of the 4 authors of the ICRT Animal Reiki course, are teaching Animal Reiki 1 and 2 and Animal Reiki Master in August as well. And so we teach those together online, and they're amazing. All the classes are amazing. If you've been feeling called to it, it would be a great time to take those classes. So, Colleen, why don't you go ahead? You've talked about scope of practice a little bit. You've mentioned it, but what does it mean?
Okay. So again, what we've been covering is topics, spiritual language that, what does that even mean? And then, at the beginning of the month, you guys wrote a bunch of different topics into the chat. And so we've kind of been going through them, but then different ones show up for us just in our personal or professional life. And so the one that has shown up this last couple of weeks really is questions about scope of practice. What does that mean? Also, then some of the ethics that are associated with that. That's really loud. And also permission. So some of those things that all go together. So one of the questions that I work with quite a bit, not just questions, but part of the training in Reiki 1 and 2 and Reiki Master all the way through all of our Reiki training, is understanding that when you are a Reiki practitioner and you are giving Reiki to others, what is your scope of practice? And what I mean by that is, what are your services? What are you actually trained to do? What is your skill set? Therefore, identifying the scope of your practice. And that is true whether you are working with it personally, just with friends, family, or if you are professional. So the way I define that is understanding, for instance, in my own scope of practice, I am a Reiki practitioner and a shamanic practitioner. And those things do combine for me. The training and the skill set that I have with those gives me a particular level of service that I can offer. What I also mean by it is that I am not a licensed counselor or a therapist or a physician. I do not have any training in medical intuition. My psychic abilities, because of all of the work that I've done, are amazing. But at the same time, I'm not really a psychic like, when am I going to meet this person? If it's that kind of a question in a session, it's going to take it to the what do you need to let go and what are you bringing in? It's not going to go to the, this is this person here and here and here, although that has happened. But so what I do with clients and people that I'm working with is, when I understand my scope of practice, it makes it very easy for me to stay within my own personal and professional boundaries of what my practice looks like, so that I know when I am offering a Reiki session that I am going to stay within a certain style of practice. I'm going to stay within my skill set, my training, and what I'm legally also allowed to do, because we have legalities that get in the mix, and then the ethics of it. So for instance, if a person really needs a medical practitioner, well, then I am going to be a complementary therapy to that. So I'm not a primary therapist. So, for instance, another example of that is I would call my Reiki practice a complementary therapy rather than an alternative therapy, because I'm not replacing other types of treatments or traditions with what I'm doing. My Reiki practice complements those things. So, first of all, where that's helpful is in your ability to identify what you do in a practice. So, let's take it even to a website, just to simplify a visual of it. And you take it to what are your services? And you offer these levels of services. These are the things that I do as a Reiki practitioner. This is also what I do because I'm a shamanic practitioner along with a Reiki practitioner. And what I've found has happened with that is that also has kind of the energy of my practice ended up with the types of clients and the types of Reiki students that I have. So, for instance, I would say that the majority of my clients and even students have a very, in the clients, there's typically spiritual healing, spiritual injury that I'm working with, say more than physical injury. If I'm working with a physical or medical issue, typically then my session's going to take it to where is the spiritual energy and injury that then has shown up as physical. And I'm aware of that. So when I'm working with clients that have a physical injury, then I'm also clear with them that maybe the work that I do with them will actually cure their physical situation. But more than likely, what it's going to do is go in to heal whatever the other injuries that go with that are. And then the body is empowered for the physicality to heal as well. And mental health is the same thing, because I'm not a counselor. And I don't treat my sessions as a counselor. I don't give advice, for instance. On occasion, I'll step out of a situation, maybe with a long-term client, and just say, okay, this is me to you now. I'm not being the Reiki practitioner in this moment. I can think of a few times that, I'm aware that that's what I'm going to do, because now it is just from me as a human woman with experience speaking to you as a person in your situation. But normally I don't do that unless in the Reiki session, I'm really kind of guided towards, I'm being told to have this conversation one-on-one with someone. But that's uncommon for me. So I'm going to clarify that. I pretty well am clear about my scope of practice and that I'm not a counselor. What I do know is that the Reiki energy will guide the person to either their solutions or their choices or the resources of perhaps a therapist in a different area or a medical physician in a different area, or perhaps even a psychic, the right psychic that they're looking for. That those might be things then that I'm going to either refer people that I know, or I feel like Reiki will guide the person and help them find the right resources that they need for themselves. And so I'm very clear about it. And where that's helpful is for me as a practitioner, is it clarifies my boundaries for me, not only for my clients, but for me. So, for instance, I just had somebody send me a question about a particular session they had done. And to me, I would clearly have said, this is outside of the scope of my practice. And that was because it was a very dramatic display by the client during the Reiki session, and very dramatic. And in that case, and it was an unknown person, in that case, that person may have mental health issues. They may have a medical issue, and it's outside the scope of my practice. And so then to me, I would say that to them. That's actually, those are the words that I use, is I really recommend that you get treatment or seek help from, these resources, because this is actually outside of the scope of my practice. Now, if I'm aware that that person is going to find those other resources, and then I become a complementary therapy to that, then I may relook at the situation. But in this particular example, like, I would choose not to treat that particular situation. And so that's the other piece to know, is that if you're a practitioner, you get to choose your scope of practice. You get to choose what you do want to work with and what you don't want to work with. In this case, it was clearly, like I say, it could have been drugs, it could have been mental health, but clearly way more dramatic than my skill set would allow. Potentially extreme trauma, could be extreme religious trauma. And so I recommended to the person who sent me the email, like, what do I do? That's what I would do. I would say, this is outside of the scope of my practice. So anyway, I'm trying to just give some ideas with that, and then the awareness that you get to decide what that looks like for you. So another example might be in our Reiki master classes, we teach about spirit release. Well, that is when we'll talk about this in another whole time, because it's too big a subject to talk about today here. But that's if you have a discarnate spirit attached. And as a practitioner, I've probably done thousands of those, like a lot, because of the way Reiki does the energy, does the healing in that case, is so gentle and compassionate that I'm comfortable with it. But another person might think, I don't ever want to do that. Well, you get to decide that. You get to decide what kind of clients you want to work on, what we call your ideal client. You get to envision who they are, actually ask Reiki to send those specific clients to you. And if the clients that are outside of the scope of your practice, that they don't even, decide to get in touch with you. Also, the same thing is true with if you're teaching Reiki. So even if you're teaching Reiki, I'm very clear with the Reiki energy itself, that I really only want the students who are sincere. I don't have any attachment to how a person is going to utilize Reiki in their life, but just that that they're authentically and sincerely there. And what I mean by that, for instance, I've had a couple of times, and this is again only a couple of times, and I've taught thousands of students, but if you think about maybe like one time I had somebody who very clearly said, can I just leave early? All I want is the Reiki certificate to prove that I have Reiki, because it's better for my marketing for my business. Like, that would be a definite no. And please don't ever say I'm your teacher. Like, that's the kind of student that I don't want. Or I've had students that maybe think that Reiki is going to do, like I had one that thought it would make him a guru and he would have an entourage. Now, in that case, I was still happy enough to work with him as a student, but still always clear that, like, well, yeah, this is your vision of this. Reiki will take care of that. Where I draw the line with who I will teach is integrity and ethics. So I have had several times where people have had really serious integrity issues that have shown up. One time, false advertising, because this was a student of mine and I knew how much work she had done, and she was advertising that her scope of practice was way beyond what skill set I knew she had. And so things like that, like I knew, it's like, I'm not your teacher. So integrity things, ethical things, those are the kinds of things I'm speaking of that I ask Reiki not to send me those students. As far as what I mean by sincere and authentic, that is just anyone who is sincerely just inviting Reiki. And sometimes people don't even know what that is. I mean, I'll get people all the time that will show up and they just heard the word and they find themselves in a Reiki 1 class, or maybe they've had one session and they find themselves in a Reiki 1 class, or maybe they heard about it, 5 years ago and end up in the Reiki 1 class. So that to me is still sincere. So I'm not necessarily qualifying anything other than ethics, integrity, that kind of thing. So with that takes you back to scope of practice. And as a Reiki practitioner, if your training is in Reiki, unless you have licenses in the other areas, such as you are actually a counselor, mental health practitioner, or physical health practitioner, then you want to stay within the scope of your practice. With animal Reiki, it's the same thing. We have the scope of our practice, what we can do with animal Reiki, and then also if somebody has a behavioral issue and you are not skilled in behavioral training, that then you would have them go to a behavioral therapist or a dog trainer, that type of a thing. And the same with physical issues, that you would have them see a veterinarian. So scope of practice, when you really clarify that for yourself, it helps you hold to who you are. One that's kind of speaking to me right now is, I know another colleague of mine just got a call to work on somebody in a hospital that was an unknown client, but the hospital was looking for a qualified practitioner. So she went, and it was an end-of-life situation. And the family actually thought that it would be a miracle cure. And so when you know that you are staying in the scope of your practice, you would know going into a situation like that, that you would, immediately communicate what it is that you do, and that you are there to bring healing to the situation, but that, you're not there promising any kind of a cure for that particular ailment. So it helps you define yourself, and it helps you define who you are as a practitioner. It also helps you define what kind of a Reiki practice you want to have, and whether that is working with family and friends. Kind of family and friends, I have to say, in my past, I'm a little bit more like I'll practice a little bit more with them, and you can stretch the boundaries a little bit more, or maybe you need to actually bring the boundaries in even closer. That could be possible too. So family and friends can be one situation, but it's just helpful to think in that term, to think in the term of what is my scope of practice? What do I want that to be? What are my skills? What is my training? What's my accuracy? And how do I communicate that to the people that I would love to work with? And so those people are called ideal clients. And you can Google that, or it's an avatar. Like, if you Google ideal client, it'll help you identify who you're speaking to if you are, trying to talk to people about what it is that you do. So scope of practice also takes you to help you identify what your services are. So that helps you put into perspective if you are offering particular types of service and what you want that to look like. And you get to pick that. There are no requirements by Reiki or anything else that you develop a scope of practice that is outside of your comfort zone or what you want it to look like. So anyway, Robyn, maybe you have anything that you want to add to that, or if you want to go into the invocation.
Yeah, I think we better go into the invocation. I just wanted to add to this last piece that whatever your ideal client might just be you. So
yes,
it doesn't have to be others. You can just work on family and friends, but many people in these circles, many people receive Reiki just to work on it for them. And that is equally valid as a practitioner. Yes, there was the question in the chat is, have you ever written an article regarding ideal client in Reiki magazine? So Colleen, I don't know if you want to, or Danny, you want to pull that up. She did.
Yeah.
It's called something different, but it's a part of an article that she wrote. And there's tons of resources online. Just Google it. But I also wanted to just say, Colleen and I say, I don't know all the time, or qualify things of like, this isn't in the scope of my practice. You'll hear us say that when we talk about astrology. So we're not experts in that. We just know a little bit. We'll qualify it. Or if somebody asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, it is definitely okay to say, I just don't know about that. I can either, research it and get back to you, or if it's entirely out of the scope of your practice, like Colleen said, refer to them, or, just say, I don't even have a referral for that. I'm just not sure. So it's always okay to say, I don't know. And then on the only other thing that I'd like to add is that I kind of look at it like I do look at it as ethics and codes of ethics and standards of practice. And at the same time, I also think of it in terms of if I would feel uncomfortable to be on the receiving end of an action, that is my guidepost. So if somebody is sending me or not sending me Reiki because I trust that, but if somebody's looking into my energy without my permission, that is a little bit, that's, to me is outside ethics. And I wouldn't do that to somebody else. I might send them Reiki. Sometimes I've sent Reiki and I've had the person, there's a very clear no there. And so I will completely back out of it and not send them Reiki, and just maybe send it to the situation. Or if somebody is giving me medical advice or counseling advice that isn't qualified to do so, I'm like, well, you're not qualified to do so. It's one thing if, you're having a chat or a conversation and, oh, here's some of the things that I did, like herbs or supplement that was helpful to me. That's a different level than somebody giving me advice on that, or medical advice or behavioral advice for my animal, or, medical advice for my animal that isn't qualified to do so. If that's going to be uncomfortable or something that I would not like, that is a very easy guidepost for me to follow in the moment, rather than thinking, oh, is that in the code of ethics? Is that, oh, I can't, that is, that's a very quick reference for me as far as like, how I'm going to proceed on this. So anyways, I just wanted to add that very quickly. with it, and advice and all the different categories that you said, Colleen, psychic advice, all of those different things with it. So